Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Rather boomy. Thanks for the introduction, Annie. But I can't live up to. Am I in stereo?
No, it's good.
All right. Okay.
Everyone says it's good.
Okay. I can't quite live up to that billing. I do a film from time to time, but political commentator I can't live up to. Also, Annie's brief for the meeting was very good, but it was alarmingly wide. It suggested that I'd take in Trump, Brexit, the world situation, football and everything. And so anyway, I have a few thoughts and a few questions, and it'd be really interesting to know what you think. I can't stand here as any kind of expert, except someone who, like you, tries to ask questions and find the right questions to ask. So first of all, dealing with the appalling news from America that Donald Trump was elected, that has struck fear into the hearts and minds of so many people from different backgrounds, groups, orientations, whatever, just people really who will feel vulnerable and feel very afraid that this man with his bigotry and his prejudice and his cruelty is there to lead the country. And what I've heard laughingly referred to as the free world, that he is leading it. And I think we've heard a lot of things said, but I think we've had some confusion about the cause of Trump's arrival. And so I wanted first of all to say something about that and then to make a suggestion. It seems to me that Trump wasn't elected primarily because Hillary Clinton got her hands in the till or was tied to an elite. He actually got elected due to a process that began 40 or 50 years ago, when the Chicago economists, supported by Reagan and Thatcher, started a program that said capitalism has to be given free rein. Government has very little part to play in how the world economy runs. The main thing is profit for big corporations, and everything has to be aligned for that. So it's low taxes, weak trade unions, low wages, mass unemployment, export the industries to where the labour is cheapest, and that's the basis on which the world economy must run. And they started it by removing the democratic government in Chile and using that as the test ground for their economic program. And that's where it began. And the end of that is Trump. And because, of course, it created absolute poverty, alienation, and what they call the Rust Belt. And we've seen it in areas of our country where we made this last film in the northeast. Whole areas, towns, where there is almost nothing in terms of work, except agency work, 0 hours, so-called self-employment and so on. And there's an area of depression, of alienation, of people feeling, well, no one speaks for them. And of course, on the left, no one has spoken for them. That's been the problem. No one has spoken for them. And the Clintons, and I'm afraid Obama to an extent, they have been part of this project. They've allowed it to happen. There's been no government intervention to create industries, to create employment, to make us a self-sustaining economy, a self-sustaining society. So people have been left behind. There has been no one to speak for them. And in those circumstances where they don't hear their problems articulated in the political world, of course then they are easy prey for the far right. They're easy prey for the solution that says, it's the next door neighbour's fault, his curtains are closed. It's the guy over the road, he's got a different colour skin. And by the way, don't forget the 2 guys living together in the next village, they're certainly to blame. And that this this view that there are scapegoats, the poorest of all, the most vulnerable of all, they are the ones to blame for your own problems. That's the easy answer. And when people feel vulnerable, when they feel weak, then they are not strong. And generosity is when we have strength to spare. Generosity towards people who need to seek asylum, we can do that when we feel strong and secure. It's more difficult when people themselves feel vulnerable. So that seems to be the cause, the fundamental cause of Trump's victory. But the suggestion is this: there will be a great articulated opposition to Trump, and we've seen it already with demonstrations in New York and demonstrations across America. There will be an opposition, and we have to be part of that opposition. The Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn and our left must align themselves to that general opposition. When they're here, invite them to our meetings. Make certain they're interviewed. Make certain their voices are heard. Because that's where we need common cause. They will strengthen us. Make no mistake, they will strengthen us. And we can strengthen them. And I think what we have to insist on is the underlying cause. Because together we can take it from being an attack on Hillary Clinton as a person, and on an attack on the whole economic structure that's produced it. Because it's in our country, it's infected the whole of Western Europe, it's affected the globe. So that's my suggestion, is that we consciously link with the opposition to Trump, and we strengthen ourselves, and we offer our strength to them. And that we don't, what is not negotiable is that the cause of the far right's victory is that economic system itself. That's where we've got to aim our fire. I just want to say something briefly in passing, because I can't deal with it at length, and it needs a whole meeting on its own. But the terrible pictures that we've been seeing from Aleppo and from Mosul now, and no one can watch these. Well, I mean, we see them all the time, but the pictures from Syria are just heartbreaking. The pictures of the kids, the pictures of the families, the hospitals that have been destroyed, I mean, they're just heartbreaking. And they are the main news that we're watching. And there's a feeling, I don't know if you share this view, but there's a feeling I get from our government that we are paralysed, that they don't know what to do, that we get the news and there's no government spokesman, there's nothing. There are brave reporters there, I mean very brave cameramen in the hospitals, photographing the families, photographing the kids, hearing them talk. And it's like it's nothing to do with us. It's just a terrible thing happening. It's like a natural disaster. And I think that's not acceptable. I think that's not acceptable. I mean, first of all, Jeremy had the grace and the courage to apologise to Iraq, and on behalf of the Labour Party. And thank goodness he did that, because we can hold our heads up. Those, again, I think we need to go further. And I've put this really as a suggestion and a question to know what people here think. But I think we have to, and I hope under Jeremy Corbyn this is what we would do. We would take a leading role in a non-aligned group in the United Nations, because the answer to all these terrible scenes that we witness is the rule of law. There can be no other answer but the rule of law. We can't go in for the adventures, the imperialist adventures, I think many of us would say, because we're only there when we think we can rip the people off for their oil or their trade or their whatever, or their markets. But but that we have to, the role that we can play is to appeal to the wider United Nations, not just the Security Council, because we know that's going to be tied up in realpolitik and every obstruction put in its path, but to appeal to the rest of the world, the non-aligned nations, to the nations of the South, to the African states, of Latin America, and say that we must build a pressure within the United Nations for the rule of law. You know, never mind the realpolitik between Putin and the States and Assad. There is a world elsewhere, and we have to be part of that strong demand for the rule of international law, because in the end, that's the only way we can stop it. We can't stop it by joining an adventure with the Yanks, that's for sure. It has to be the rule of law. Difficult to do, but I think it's the only way. But of course, I mean, there are big issues here. There are huge issues here. On last Monday, in the House of Commons, they showed an old film we did 50 years ago, Cathy Come Home, about the homeless family split up because it had nowhere to live. And it was very interesting because the people who invited us to show bits, well, it was Tim Farron, actually, the Liberal leader, and he was very nice, you know. I mean, he knows we're different political persuasions, but he was very pleasant, and there was a Labour spokesman, and she was very good, and there were a lot of people running campaigns, and they all said how bad it is, and people from every campaign said, well, if we could do that, we could maybe help our situation a bit more, and if we did that, and if we did the other. And I sat there and I thought, this is exactly what happened 50 years ago. This is exactly what happened. Good people, good campaigns, doing their best, no big picture, and here we are, and it's worse. And again, what is the lesson of that? Why is it worse? And it seems to me, and again I don't know if you agree, it seems to me it's worse because it's been left to the market. And the market doesn't work. The market doesn't work. In London you have tower blocks with flats, apartments worth £50 million, standing empty. You drive past them, they're almost all dark at night, empty, because they're investments for very rich people or institutions, because they think they can make more money by investing in a multi-million-pound penthouse than they can in investing in something else. So they're investments, and that's what our building industry is doing. And that's really not acceptable. With the market, if there's a need and there's no profit to be made, the need goes unmet. So we can't leave housing to the market. Shelter did a brilliant report, it's just come out, about experiences of what it's like to be in temporary accommodation. And I thought I'd read you a little bit. Maybe there isn't time, but it's just a little bit. The number of homeless children has gone up. There's 120,000 homeless children now in Bristol. That's in temporary accommodation. There's 5 years ago, there were over 5,000 children living in this type of shared accommodation. That's where emergency accommodation, homeless B&Bs, cheap hotels, hostels, large houses filled with families, one family in each bedroom. That 5,700 has now gone up to 12,900 in the last couple of years. But there was one heart-rending story of a woman and child who were evicted. They were sent a thing of revenge eviction, you know, where somebody is evicted when they've complained, and the landlord in their case says, sorry, you complained, you're out now. So they were in the street, they went to the council, the guy from the council took them in the car to what was going to be their home. He left them in the car park. He said, here's the key, outside this building. And he said, you'll be fine, it's on the 3rd floor. He said, I haven't got any space to park the car, so go in by yourself. And the woman says, so she took her son, who's a toddler, took her luggage, bags, and went through the staircase. There was no light in the staircase. She lit up her phone to see what the way. Saw carpets burned with cigarette ends, empty cans of beer, and drunk people at the front of the building. Her son was terrified. Then she went to the 3rd floor, to the door of the room that the council offered me. The door was without any locks. She could open it without the key, just a hole in the door. So she opened up, and it looked like a squat. There were mice droppings, there was no light in there. It was January, it was dark outside already, I couldn't see anything. My son was terrified. He said, Mummy, let's go home, come back home. What should I say to him? We didn't have any home. You know, that's happened to thousands, hundreds and thousands of people now. And it just goes on and on. And I think that's why Jeremy's policy of public investments for council housing, where you plan estates, you plan to regenerate estates with the best planners, the best architects, everyone employed directly, you know, from the brickies to the chippers to the hod carriers to everyone employed directly, with proper conditions for building workers, because that's something else that people forget about when they talk about housing, is that building workers are now casual workers, and it's back to the days of the lump. For old people like me who remember the lump, where people were just casual labourers turned up for a day's work. And that's coming back. So it needs proper planned housing with environmentally sustainable communities. And central to that planning is work. Because we have to, communities aren't sustainable if there's no work. And there has to be work planned. And that's why the second domestic issue seems to me that it's very important that we talk about is what work means now. Because the security of work, where you would get a trade and it would last a lifetime, that's gone. It's gone under the pressure of harsh competition. So we have to develop a policy which respects the need for job security, because workers have independent interests. The companies say, well, we need flexible labour force. No. Well, the people doing the work have needs. They need security of income. They need to know that they'll have work not just this week, but next week and the years to come. Those are needs. And they're in conflict with this demand for a flexible workforce. So we've got to say, no, the interests of working people come first. And that's how we organise what we produce and the services we deliver. We have to organise them around the need for secure employment. And that means that secure employment has to go alongside housing, because it's no use having work and no houses, just like it's no use having houses and no work. Planning is central to how we must reconstruct this economy. And you hear the Tories talking about their industrial strategy. It's no industrial strategy at all. It is no strategy. It's simply tempting employers by saying, here's a bunch you can exploit ruthlessly. Come and exploit them. That's their strategy. We would have a different strategy, starting from a different set of interests. The same is true for the health service, and I'm sure someone will talk about the health service. But, I mean, 2 headlines, just this weekend, 2 headlines. Yesterday, thousands of beds to go in NHS shake-up, and in Bath and North Somerset, which is where I live, £700 million contract to Virgin to run social care. Shocking. Richard Branson needs another island, poor bugger, you know. They need it, don't they? I mean, this is deeply shocking. And we know what this means. Everybody knows what it means. It means how are they going to make their money? They're going to cut down on labour costs. That means insecure work. It means less time to look after people. and a worse service. We know that's what it means. And why they're doing it? Well, partly they're doing it because that's ideologically where they are, and their immediate excuse is the government saying you've got to cut back. So their ideology and their tactics coincide. Cut back, good, we can do what we want to. And that's where they stand, and of course that's absolutely to be opposed. The intention is clearly that the NHS will be a skeleton resource, the last resort, and that people will generally, if you can afford it, have a private health insurance. That's where they're going. It's clear. And that we've all had experiences that illustrate that. If you need a minor operation, you're encouraged to go to a private hospital, paid for by the NHS. And I had that experience, just was given that choice recently, and I was told, you've got a choice. The GP couldn't tell me where I had to go. I said, tell me, where am I going to go for this minor operation? He said, they said, we'll send you a form. So on the form, I had a choice between a private hospital, paid for by the NHS, and the main hospital in Bath. I phoned the doctor, I said, look, give me some guidance. I don't know, who am I going to see? What choice have I got? I'm ignorant of what is available. She said, I can't tell you. So I can't tell you, but if you go to the private hospital, you can park for free, and also you'll get seen much quicker. Which would you like? Well, it's obviously steering you into that. And then, of course, when you go, you get leaflets saying this is what the private hospital does. Here's a form if you're interested in health insurance. And everything is put in front of you that this is better, and then you're encouraged to join. And it's not. I mean, you can see the game. It's so plain. It's embarrassing that they are so naked in what they're doing, and at the same time they're cutting back the essential services that we need. The fourth, I mean, we could go on and on, but the other aspect is obviously social security and benefits, and that's the thing that Annie was kind enough to say we'd done the film around. And it's the treatment of people who are most vulnerable, desperately in need of support. You know, when people go through bad times, maybe disabled, of course, have suffered worse than anyone. But people may be sick temporarily, and they are treated with absolute cruelty. I think that the demands, and I think, again, very pleased to see that Debbie Abrams in Jeremy's front bench team, one of the good ones, I think, her right call is to end the assessments where people, when the doctor and the consultant have said you can't work, you're not free to work, you'll endanger your life if you work, the state says no, we want to check you again. Well, Debbie Abrams has called for that to end, and for the punitive sanctions, because they know when people are sanctioned, their lives are in chaos. Many people are left homeless. Many people go to the food bank, are forced to go to the food banks. And we know at what rate the food banks have increased. And you have to ask the question, when people are driven to not be able to eat, what is the crime for which hunger is the punishment? What crime justifies our fellow citizens being driven to extreme hunger? The other demand, and I think we can watch out for this in the coming autumn statement. There is a plan. The wretched, what's his name, Philip Hammond. He has a plan to cut the employment and support allowance for some. I don't know quite how many, but certainly a substantial cut for people who are being paid just over £100 to exist on. To cut that to just over 70. Now imagine you are the poorest of the poor, and a third of your income is just gone. And you are disabled, or you are sick. How does he expect people to cope? And that's the demand that John McDonnell has made, and I hope the Tories listen. I have no confidence they will, but we can wait and see. Anyway, I wanted to go lastly just to say a few things about how can we win, because this is the critical argument. How are we going to win? This is the big argument. I think we've got some tough questions to ask, and I want to ask one, and it's not a popular question for us to ask ourselves, but I think we have to deal with it, because we know that the far right, that UKIP, that the Tories will go for us on this issue unless we've got a convincing answer. And you can guess what I'm going to say. Well, there are two issues actually. The first one is the question of what you're going to do about immigration. And until we've got a convincing answer, they're going to nail us. Now, I've heard Jeremy's answer, which is very good, that they would make certain that there were laws in place that stopped the taking advantage of cheap labour. And that's good. But I think also we have to acknowledge that the free market in labour will work against wages. It will work against working people. And I know there are statistics that say, yes, wages stay high, that isn't the main reason. But I think the common sense of the common people says, if you've got people who will work for less than we will work, that's going to have an effect. And we saw it absolutely at first hand when we did a film called It's a Free World about people coming from Eastern Europe. And we did a lot of research, and we went to a farm in East Anglia. We went to lots of places, but this one stuck in our minds. We went to this farm, and there were women from the Baltic countries. I think it was Lithuania, but it might have been one of the other two. And they were working in the fields. They're picking fruit or vegetables. And they were women, all women, mainly middle-aged, who had left their families behind, who were sending their wages back home. They were working for less than the minimum wage, which was low. This is a few years ago. That was very low. They were getting charged for their tickets to come here and then get back, their transport. They all lived in one house in dormitories. They were transported to the farms where they worked, for which they paid by the agency. They were given clothes to wear, which they paid for by the agency, to the agency. And they worked for the lowest wages that you could imagine. They went out one day a week to the supermarket, and when they went out, they put on the best dress, because it was the only time they left the house. Now that's a level of exploitation that is intolerable. And we said to the guy who was running it, and why don't you ask the people in the local community to work? It's their work. They have no work. It's the land they've worked all for as far back as one can even know, for hundreds of years. Why not employ them? And the guy said, well, he said, if they want to come and live in their house, if they want to live in these wages, if they want to pay me for their uniforms and the bus to get them there, yeah, why not? And we haven't changed that. You know, that's still going on. And I think the logic of that rings with people. And we've got to have a better answer to that question. We've got to have a better answer. I think one thing, the dilemma we have is that we all recognise, I'm sure here, that the working class is international. That our enemies are not workers in other countries. We are international. And the same multinationals will exploit people here as will exploit people in any other part of the globe. But if we if we allow those employers just to thrust aside